So welcome all to the meeting. Members, I'll now just confirm who's in the room with me and who's in Starleaf. So today in the room with me, I'm acting as chairperson today, is Stephen Dunn and Paul Frew. And on Starleaf today we have Andy Allen, Aisling Riley, Paula Bradley, Anya Murphy. Thank you very much. If there's anyone else arrives, we'll certainly add them. Members, as you know, the meeting today is solely to take evidence on the betting bill. No other matters will be discussed. Members, just before we start, I want to inform you that at the meeting on the 14th of December, we plan to hear from 4 or 5 organisations on this bill in order to ensure we complete oral evidence sessions before the Christmas recess, if at all possible. I know that this will involve a longer meeting on a plenary day, but I would encourage as many members to attend as possible to ensure we maintain a quorum. Consideration stage of the Social Security Terminal Illness Bill will also be taking place that morning, so we may need to break to allow members to speak on that and then reconvene. Members, just like to remind members of the requirement to declare any interests that they may have to any items under discussion today. And I move now to item number 1, which is apologies. And members, any apologies from anyone today? I'm not seeing any hands up or anything today. Another one will join me. Oh, right, okay, no problem. Okay, I'm not seeing that. If there are amendments, members, let us know. Draft minutes. Members, the draft minutes from the meeting on the 30th of November 2021 are on page 5 of your pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of the 30th of November as drafted? If I could hear a yes, yeah, thank you. Moving swiftly on now to agenda item 4, which is the GAA briefing on the Betting, Gaming, Lotteries and Amusements Amendment Bill. Members, a copy of the bill is at page 11 of your pack and the briefing paper is at page 44. And we are now being joined by, I see Dermot Marsden's there, Brian Mallon is there, and I believe that Brian McAvoy will join us shortly, so that's fine, no problem. If I could pass over to yourselves, folks, you'll have about 10 minutes to give us your presentation on what you think about this bill, and then we'll ask you a few questions. Thank you. Dermot or Brian, whoever wants to speak.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Sorry,
as our Chief Executive, Brian McAvoy, obviously has internet issues there, so I'm going to maybe just take the opening statement as outlined. And Brian can join us then and add to that as he comes in. I suppose I thank the Chairperson and the members of the committee for providing Ulster GAA this opportunity to present oral evidence in relation to the Betting, Gaming, Lotteries and Amusements Amendment Bill as it progresses through the Assembly. My name is Dermot Marsden. I'm the head of the Community Development Department for Ulster GAA and joined by Senior Staff Member Brian Mallon, Head of Finance for Ulster GAA, and Brian McAvoy, who is our Chief Executive and Provincial Secretary. From the GAA's perspective, we are one of the world's largest amateur sporting, community and cultural organisations. The Provincial Council is the governing body for the GAA in Ulster, covering 2 political jurisdictions, overseeing the work of 9 county committees and 373 clubs, as well as activity in schools, colleges, etc. We welcome the review of this gaming legislation. The existing law is based on the 1985 order, which itself is largely based on GB law dating back to 1963. So the current legislation is largely modelled on law which is almost 60 years old. No one can deny, therefore, that a review is long overdue. We also recognise the need for regulatory control and welcome the broad principle of the bill to strengthen protections for the young and more vulnerable members of our society. We are a community-based organisation in the GAA and we take our responsibility to educating and raising awareness of gambling among our members very, very seriously. Our rules do not permit any betting-related sponsorship of competitions, teams, playing gear or facilities. And additionally, no member of any team panel, team management or match official is permitted to bet in any aspect of the game in which they're involved. Many of our clubs have gambling policies in place to support the health and well-being of its members, to protect the integrity of the games first and foremost and the players, but to provide that positive example in breaking the societal link between sport and betting. The aim of the GA is a gambling awareness campaign, Reduce the Odds, is to protect the well-being of our members and the integrity of the games in general. Some examples of areas where we currently work in the Ulster GA is regarding partnering with GamCare, who promote gambling awareness programs to our clubs. And we have delivered this training to some of our staff in autumn. We're also represented in the Wellbeing and Sport Forum, which have offered the Sporting Chance workshop, which specifically deals with mental health in relation to addiction. And the Sporting Chance workshop has been delivered to many of our GA clubs and will be delivered to our staff in mid-February 2022. I've mentioned the Reduce the Odds campaign and programme, which our clubs are aware of and can get avail of. The big thing for our clubs is that responsible gambling policy, which is one of our requirements of our club accreditation scheme, Club MOI. And we will insist on that at one of the levels within that. So I suppose at all levels we try and address this area of gambling to promote awareness of it and to steer young people down the right path if we can. I think our Chief Executive has joined the call, so maybe I'll let Brian take over from this stage.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Apologies, John. I think we're having, must be storm barras causing havoc this morning, I think. Basically, I think where Jim had got to was just in relation to the some of the initiatives that we're doing. He talked there about GamCare. We're also represented on the Wellbeing and Sport Forum, which has offered the Sporting Chance workshop, which deals with mental health in relation to addiction. We've delivered that to many of our clubs and we will be delivering them to all our staff in February. We're also involved in the promotion of the National GA's Reduce the Odds Gambling Awareness Programme, and there's more information for that in the members' packs in relation to links where you can access more detail on that. We are also involved in the development of a club responsible gambling policy for healthy club officers, which basically they can take forward with their clubs in conjunction with their club executive committees. In fact, that's one of the requirements we have in relation to our Club MY accreditation scheme. And of course, we provide ongoing support to clubs who want their members to be more aware of for awareness around problem gambling. In relation to the bill itself, there are some provisions which are more relevant to us than others. So there are some things like opening hours for bookmakers, for example, where we feel there are others much more qualified to give evidence on those particular aspects than we are. So we will concentrate, with the Chair's permission, on aspects of the bill which are most relevant to us as a sporting organisation. And the key one of those is in relation to societies lotteries. This also, Jay, we don't envisage any objections to reforming societies lotteries, as this is often seen as fundraising as opposed to gambling. And most people who purchase tickets in a society's lottery do so primarily to support the benefactor and do so knowingly that their chances of winning are quite slim. Fundraising is vital for GA clubs, and many make use of lotteries and raffles to generate income, much needed income indeed. The current rules for societies lotteries limit fundraising capacity of GA clubs, other sporting clubs and charitable organisations. So we warmly welcome the provision to remove the £1 ticket price of a society's lottery ticket. We believe that GA units themselves are best placed to set the price of a ticket, and based on their own particular circumstances and their own particular requirements. We do appreciate there is a requirement and a need for upper limits, and every draw will be different, but we would suggest maximum purchase prices in the ballpark of £100 to £150 and a maximum prize fund in the ballpark of £400,000 to £500,000. We would be concerned that in respect of societies lotteries, that the required changes in respect of any cap on ticket price or overall prize fund may not happen by secondary legislation as envisaged, unless the primary legislation allows for inbuilt periodic reviews. We do understand that the 1985 order does give provision to the Department and the Minister to amend the lottery stakes, the prizes, the caps, etc. but its weakness is that it did not provide for, does not provide for periodic review. And given the fact that this legislation was enacted 36 years ago and it's only been addressed now, and I know there was an attempt a number of years ago to do it, basically means that it hasn't been subject to any ongoing review. That's why it's so dated. We therefore recommend that the primary legislation, this bill, should include a clause making it a statutory requirement for periodic review by the Minister, and we would suggest that a period roughly of maybe every 3 to 5 years that review should be taking place, and any review could take place and be enacted if there are any amendments done so by secondary legislation. But we would want the primary legislation to have a built-in timescale when this is reviewed. We would also propose that the organisers of societies' lotteries are able to sell tickets with free chances as part of their selling strategy. So, for example, 6 tickets for the price of 5. Now, it's not something where, there was some division in relation to this, but we think on balance we would prefer the free chance. We do accept, however, that where a club or a unit is doing such a raffle, that they would have to make sure that their governance control should be strict anyway, but need to be particularly strict in relation to that aspect of things. As an all-island organisation, we're fully cognisant of the disadvantage units here are compared with our southern counterparts when it comes to trying to organise fundraising lotteries, particularly in relation to the ticket price and the maximum price fund. And again, our units are at a similar disadvantage when compared with our counterparts in England, Scotland and Wales. So equally, as an all-Ireland organisation, we're also disadvantaged by the current provision that restricts the sale of tickets in Northern Ireland when the draw is being organised in another in another political jurisdiction. And this restriction needs to be removed under this bill. And it's our clear view that there should be no bar on the sale or purchase of tickets on an all-Ireland or indeed all UK basis. Ulster GA notes that there are currently no provisions in the bill to amend the rules on private lotteries and small lotteries at exempt entertainments. Many of our clubs organise what are known as half-time draws at games, where tickets are sold on site amongst the attendees. In the vast majority of games, the 1,000 limit for tickets sold on the premises won't be breached, but on occasion it will be undoubtedly threatened. And moving forward, we think this is an area that needs to be addressed. The legislation also, the current bill also provides an ideal opportunity for the £1,000 cap on private lotteries to be reviewed and incorporated in primary legislation. In relation to small lotteries and exempt entertainments, we would ask that the requirement to notify police 7 days in advance is removed. Many clubs at this time of year, at least pre-COVID anyway, but they basically run we Christmas bazaars, and they have raffles for small prizes like hampers, that sort of thing. And at present, these tickets can only be sold on the premises, but it would be beneficial to allow these are small-scale tickets to be sold prior to the event. So we think that the current legislation is overly restrictive and indeed very much outdated in relation to this also. And just before I conclude, just a couple of items just in relation to cheating. As outlined earlier by Dermot in our statement, the GA prohibits anyone directly involved in the game from betting on any aspect of that game. So we welcome the provisions of clause 12 of the bill, making it an offence to do so, irrespective of what the final result of the game turns out to be. The current legislation only makes it an offence if what you bet on comes to pass. And under regulation, having spoken to colleagues, PSNI, whatever, that we propose that the Gambling and Lotteries Regulator be appointed, and they should have day-to-day regulatory and enforcement powers rather than the PSNI, who I know from speaking to them, they found a lot of this, they having to do this, put it mildly, they probably thought there was better things they could have been doing. So we would suggest that there be a regulator in place to do the day-to-day issues in relation to gambling legislation. And finally, just to reiterate our thanks to the committee for affording us this opportunity to present evidence on what is a very, very important issue for our units.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you for your presentation. I'm interested, just to start off the questions, your comments about other lotteries. I know in my own local area that, for instance, there would be a lottery ticket you could buy in your local Centra store, for instance. Or if you're in getting your papers, you can go and get a ticket. As you say, it's less about the cash prize, it's more about putting £1 into the local club. So you think then that the relation to the small lotteries at Exempt Entertainments, it's the one before that you're talking about, the small lotteries at Exempt Entertainments. So there's an issue with the half-time draws, and then there's an issue where those tickets can be sold. Just tease that out for us, what impact that would have.
Yeah, well, they're two separate under the existing legislation. The wee private lotteries and the small lotteries at Exempt Entertainment. They're two slightly different things, but they're very, very similar. Obviously, the half-time draw, it's on site, so it's a captive audience. So you can really only sell to the people who are on the premises. But if I have 2,000 people at a game and we're selling a ticket at £1 a time, we could easily, as I say, have breached the 1,000 threshold. Not that anyone is probably going to know other than the organisers themselves, but we'd rather keep within the law than go outside it. So we just think that now is an opportunity just to review that as well. And similarly, just for those small lotteries that Exempt Entertainments, particularly coming up to Christmas time or maybe at certain times in the year, a club may be running a particular event and they may be wanting to do a small raffle at it. And they're prohibited from selling tickets in advance of that. And even though their prizes may be, given the time of the year it is, the one we referenced in our evidence was Christmas hampers. So it would be nice to be able to sell those in advance, because people, for whatever reason, may not, coming up this time of the year, very busy, may not be able to attend. So it'd be nice to be able to sell those in advance. And, as I said earlier, we just don't think there's a need to notify the PSNA we're having a raffle for Christmas hamper, 7 days before it takes place. So we just think that's a bit draconian. And I don't think it's a good use of anybody's time, including the PSNA's time.
Can I ask you then, just finally, before I move on to the other members, I have Stephen and Anya wants to come in. What are your views on the introduction of a code of practice for societies' lotteries? Do you think that such a code should include a social responsibility element to ensure that children and those who are vulnerable are protected from gambling-related harm?
Absolutely. I think you would have seen our evidence, as a community-based organisation, how we take our social responsibilities. We place high-level governance, and we take them very, very seriously. So yeah, we would have no issue with the code of practice. It's basically would be endorsing what we do already as an organisation.
Okay, Stephen, I'll come to you. I know you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, folks, for the presentation. We certainly appreciate the efforts you've made to support those with gambling issues, and thank you for your reply on this important matter. Obviously, is it correct in 2018 you took the decision as a body to prohibit betting sponsorship right across your organisation? And in terms of that, did that leave significant financial gaps?
Actually, we don't, as we said in our evidence, we don't allow any of our competitions to be sponsored by gambling organisations. We don't allow it on our playing gear. We don't allow it, sometimes you have stadia that are named after, with a sponsor's brand on it. We don't permit it in that. And as I say, we don't allow any of our players or team officials or match officials to bet on any game. We felt it was just like we had did with other things like cigarettes, tobacco, many, many years previously. We just felt that it was the right thing to do for us as a community-based organisation. And yes, I mean, we are turning down potentially some sponsorship in that area, but we think that there's a bigger prize at stake here in relation to the message we're sending out. So yes, it has impacted on us financially, but it's a price we're prepared to pay for the greater good.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Obviously, up to 2018 then, it was fairly widespread, was it, in terms of sponsorship, across the GAA?
Not really, no. No. It's certainly compared to some other sports, the amount of betting sponsorship we had would have been quite limited. We think there were just a number of teams that have had them. I'm only aware of actually one club team, not aware of any county teams that ever had a sponsor, and certainly none of our grounds were named after betting organisations. So it wasn't that widespread, in fairness, Stephen. No.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Just one other point. Obviously, online gambling, has been on the increase greatly, and it's more accessible than ever. And betting goes way beyond the doors of the bookmakers for a lot of people these days, from all ages and particularly young people, and I suppose particularly amongst playing age of any sporting organisation. Have you noticed, an increase obviously in this amongst players? And do you think the bill could go further to tackle obviously more, in terms of online gambling and so on?
Yeah, and Jim, you might want to come in as well, because it's an area that his department specialises in. Well, not specialises, but it's one that they have. But yes, I mean, obviously accessibility, mobile phones is where most people do their betting now. And we do recognise, and that's why we have the initiatives we have in place. We do recognise that many of our young people are being sucked into this world, and that's why we do the education process. I know our county players with the GPA, they offer a very, very good service to inter-county players as well. But yes, it is a concern, and that is why we're trying to raise as much awareness, and that was one of the reasons why we took the decision that we would ensure that we wouldn't be doing anything to promote gambling through our policy rebranding. Jim, is there anything you want to add in relation to some of the initiatives?
Yeah, just anecdotally, you would hear of young people, even at school age, on mobile devices, accessing online betting and doing it with no real evidence. Is it directly impacting on our clubs or our development squads or county squads? But the chances are that it would be. So all we can do is really promote the awareness and the dangers of gambling and addictions. And I've attended some of the workshops delivered by some of our ex-county players who are high profile that would be known to have had gambling problems, and I've seen that at first hand how that can be taken in by the young people, and it would make a real significant impact. So the more of that we can do, the better. But yes, any sort of restriction on online gambling, whether it's have to be a certain age or whatever, I don't honestly know, because I don't gamble online myself, so I don't know. But anything that can help reduce those impacts and take young people away from those distractions would be very, very welcome.
Yeah, thank you, folks.
Thank you very much. Can we bring Anya into the spotlight? Anya, you have a question?
Yeah, can you all hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Brian, I'd like to thank you for your presentation so far, and I suppose I just take this opportunity to declare an interest as a member of Listen to the Emmett's GAC before I mention anything else. Brian, in terms of GAA clubs in the south, and I know a lot of them at the minute are having raffles for huge prizes, the likes of houses and that type of thing, and it's been a real issue and has caused some problems for clubs here in the north. Could you possibly elaborate on the real life effects and impacts that this has on clubs in the north in terms of their fundraising compared to their counterparts in the south?
Thanks, Sonia, for your question. Yeah, it is an issue. We will be, members may be aware, I mean, we did run into a problem with one of our clubs in County Down a number of years ago, where they did try to do a house raffle, and obviously following a complaint or to the PSNI, they had to investigate, and the club stopped the raffle. And that was basically the one that probably raised most issues, in that at the same time there were other units of the association just a few miles down the road across the border who were doing a similar type, but with no restrictions. It's basically the difficulty is the legislation is very, very different north and south. Now in the south there are caps on prices and on funds. However, there are inbuilt exemptions for charities and for philanthropical organisations, of which sporting clubs and community groups are seen as that. So basically, they are exempt. Okay, so they basically what you do there is if you purchase a ticket and there's no limit on the price or no limit on the fund, if you purchase a ticket for those, you become of the, so say for example, it's if I take a club, say take County Cavan, so for example, you become they did a house there quite recently, so you become a friend of Cavan by buying that, but it's essentially you become a member of that group who are organising the draw, and as a sporting club you have that exemption, and that is how they are able to do those, but we're in the north not. So essentially exemptions are given to charities, philanthropical organisations, which include sporting and community groups. So that is the big difference here between the north and the south in relation to it. That there are inbuilt exemptions for good causes, shall we say, of which sporting clubs are seen as one.
That's brilliant, Brian. Look, thank you very much. Thank you.
Paul Frew.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Chair. It's very interesting, your presentation, and the aspect of the removing the £1 limit, and I get that. You go as far in your presentation as to suggest an upper limit, and that you cite a ballpark figure of £100 to £150, with a maximum prize fund in the ballpark of 400 to 500k. What do you base those figures on? Is that just your understanding of where it should be, your opinion, or is there actually evidence behind those figures that suggests that those are the right? I'm not saying they're wrong or right. I'm just wondering. Yeah. I'm just trying to explore how you've come to that figure.
I suppose if you take a number of things that, like some clubs, for example, Mr. Free would like to do maybe something like £10 a month or something, so that's why you're sort of getting it in that. Most ticket draws, that would happen in the south or in England and Wales wouldn't go over, they would be in that ballpark. They wouldn't much go beyond 100. I've seen a few just beyond it. And of course, the legislation in England allows for, allows for up to about 400. Well, actually, it allows for 4 million if you sell enough tickets. But no, we think that essentially £500,000 is probably our limit, because we don't want clubs and units who are organising draws to run, to lose the run of themselves and think, Christ, if we have something that's maybe worth $1 million or 2 million or something, we'll get many more sales, and they put themselves at risk. So no, we would see this as the upper limit, and we think that it's a reasonable amount based on, say, £100 ticket. The number of tickets that they could sell. They've obviously done their research, so we feel that the £500,000 is basically basically means realistic in terms of the number of tickets they would have to sell, rather than to have a prize fund much bigger. So it's based on that sort of thing. So
yeah. Just to be clear, then, are you suggesting that there should be a maximum purchase price limit, or are you saying that if there is one, this is what it should be?
Well, I think there should be a maximum purchase. I mean, I think, as I say, for regulation purposes and for clubs themselves. And our recommendation would be it's in that £100 to £150 ballpark, yeah, as a maximum. Vast majority of draws will not be that. They'll be £10, £20. But some, for example, and on you touched there about, if you're raffling a house, I think people would expect to pay something slightly, more than a £5 or a tenner for a ticket, so it's those, but those are an exception rather than the norm,
Understand. And do you think there should just be an upper limit, or do you think there should be a sequencing of amounts? So, your £100 should get a maximum prize of 400. £50 ticket should be 200,000. Do you think there should be like a sequencing, a pro rata approach, or should there just be a ceiling?
I think there'll be a ceiling. I think it gets messy, doesn't it? I think it overly complicates things. And good luck to a sporting club or whoever they are if they sell their tickets for £20 and they're able to sell so many tickets that they could, if you say a tiered thing, that they could exceed that. So say, for example, for a £20 ticket, you had a 200,000 ceiling, and they suddenly found themselves with 300,000 worth of tickets sold. What do they do? Because of their own enthusiasm and the good sales pitch that they've done. So no, I think just an upper limit, a reasonable one. And the reason, as I say, we put that in is to stop units losing the run of themselves and thinking, God, we have such great prices, we could sell X amount, so we're given this, and suddenly they fall short in their ticket sales. So it's in that respect, we want to put a safe target.
Can you enlighten me? I've read the old order, 885 order, and I must say it sounds like a minefield with regards to somebody organising this, with regards to the costs of it and the exceeds, and no price in the lottery should exceed, and no expenditure, all of that. I've read it a couple of times, and I can't work out, if I was to run something like this, how I would be staying within the law. I know that it's being repealed, and they're making it they seem to be trying to simplify it with regards to 20% of the whole proceeds of the lottery. Now that's the expenses of the lottery as far as I know. But can you explain to me how it works at the present time? And what this will mean?
Like yourself, you're not alone in Mr. Frew, in knowing the complexities of the current law. Basically, yes, you can only spend, I think, on the my reading of the 1985 orders, you can only spend 10% of your intake maximum. That is all that can be spent on the organisation, on your administrative costs. And that's quite difficult. And I know that the proposal is to increase that to 20, which is probably more realistic. And that's quite difficult because all you can do is project the amount of tickets you think you can sell, unless you put a limit on the number of tickets you're selling at the very outset, Yeah. So it is complex and it's cumbersome, and it's just unnecessary bureaucracy for draw organisers. We think the 20% should encompass all the expenses. So we would welcome that provision to increase it from 10% to 20%. We don't think that will be exceeded. But
do you think there's a better way of doing it other than a percentage?
Well, yes, there is. I mean, potentially you wouldn't put any percentage on it at all. You could basically just say that whatever your expenses are. But the issue with that, I suppose, is you are placing a lot of trust in the draw organisers for self-regulation, and it's much more difficult to monitor. For anyone who is like an auditor coming in and doing that sort of and doing an oversight. So you're putting a lot of trust. So you have to have good governance procedures in place. But you could do away with the percentage totally. But I think 20% would cover. I don't think, as long as you sold a reasonable amount of tickets, of course, I think 20% would, most draws would certainly fall in within that bracket. 10% they could be exceeded, and probably are, to be honest.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
No other member has indicated this morning, gentlemen, so I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. That's what you get for having such a good written presentation to yourselves. So I'd like to thank Brian McAvoy, Brian Mallon and David Marsden very much for coming along to present to us this morning. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're moving on quickly now to item number 5. Members, I'll just say we've 42 minutes left before plenary starts, and our minister's up first with a statement, so we are going to keep quite concentrated this morning. If we could bring then Sean Murphy and Patrick Neeson from the IFA, who are going to give us a briefing on the Betting, Gaming, Lotteries and Amusements Bill. Sean, I see you there, and I see Patrick. Good morning to you both. If I could let you know that I can give you 5-10 minutes, and then we'll go into questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I will start on behalf of the IFA. Just a small point of clarification. It's Patrick Nelson, not Neeson. I'm not related to the famous Ballymena actor, although sometimes it would be good if I was, I think. So
apologies, Patrick.
And Chair, you put us under pressure there by saying what a good presentation that was from our friends at GAA. So I know Brian will be basking in that glory at the moment, but we will do what we can from our perspective. So I've, just by way of introduction, I am Chief Executive of the Irish Football Association, and Sean is Chief Operating Officer of the association. We've both been around for quite a while, Sean for 3.5 years, myself for 12.5 years now. And the Irish FA is the governing body for football in Northern Ireland. So our mission, we promote, foster and develop football for everyone across the country. And our vision, hopefully a more exciting one, is that we want to be a world-class progressive organisation where we inspire every child to be part of the Northern Ireland football family and wear their green shirt with pride. Financially, one of our objectives is to raise as much funds as we can through the assets and rights that we hold or we promote. And we budget to spend that money each year to develop football in a myriad of ways throughout Northern Ireland, on the international stage, domestically, and in grassroots as well. And probably like GAA, our member clubs are in effect our shareholders, so we don't have any dividends to pay out to anybody, and we reinvest all of the money that we raise. We do have a charity arm, the Irish FA Foundation, and that's a really significant provider of education, health, and social inclusion work here in Northern Ireland. And I don't know if you saw this, but last week, in conjunction with UEFA, we launched our social return on investment numbers, which indicate that when you add up all of the economic, social and health benefits of all football participation in Northern Ireland, the value to our country of those benefits is £470 million a year. Now, I know we're not here to talk about this today, Chair, but I do think we should come back and do so, because it's a very good story for the benefits of sport and football in particular. So that's maybe for another day. A quick overview on our work in relation to gambling. We don't currently have a gambling partner as an association, and we've declined recent overtures from such companies. So it's not something we're actively looking to focus on at this point. We have, however, sold advertising minutes on our LED boards around the ground for senior men's games to betting companies across Europe. Quite often, when we're selling LED minutes, it's not really the local populace we're targeting. We're targeting the people who live in Italy or Sweden or Lithuania or wherever it is that the away team is from. So we have sold some LED pitch minutes to betting companies. And like Dermot said, for the GAA, we work with GamCare, and GamCare we think are the UK's leading provider of advice for those harmed by gambling. And that's provided training, awareness training to our staff, and we've offered free training out to our clubs as well. And we've extended the gambling module of training to projects like Stay Onside and Connect, which are some of our major outreach projects that we run within our foundation. We've also got a bespoke mental health program, which we call Ahead of the Game, and that's offered to all grassroots clubs. And that includes a specific section on gambling, and that's led by our former Northern Ireland international footballer, Keith Gillespie. And of course, Keith has suffered at times in the past in this area. So it is a very good person to speak up on that issue. A couple of key points from our written submission, Chair, and then I'll hand back to you. And a bit like Brian said, within GAA, we're not qualified to give views on everything within the bill. So in terms of the Clause 9, which I know we've just touched on a little bit within GAA, the rules for societies' lotteries, we would welcome the removal of the £1 limit on ballots and the other restrictions as a real boost for clubs who do need to raise funds post-pandemic. A lot of opportunities for club funding have fallen away since the pandemic. There are many businesses who can't afford to support clubs in the way that they would have done in the past. And so, ballots are important sources of potential funding, particularly for small clubs. Secondly, we very much welcome the recognition of cheating as a criminal offence. We do a lot of work with our own integrity team to monitor betting patterns on games in Northern Ireland. We also work with UEFA, who have a very strong integrity team, to identify difficult betting patterns and to take action based when we see data in that area. So we think it's very important that cheating is introduced as a criminal offence within this bill. And in particular, we very much welcome the use of the levy, the potential levy, to directly fund projects related to gambling addiction. And of course, we very much support the education programs that would be funded by a levy, but we'd recommend that consideration is given to also funding activity-related sports projects through this levy as well, such as potentially coaching courses or five-a-side opportunities or fun football opportunities, because we think that that's a great diversionary tactic around football. So in summary, we welcome the ability for clubs to increase raised funds, particularly as our industry traverses out of COVID, just like other industries. We welcome the recognition of cheating as a criminal offence. We believe the levy is important, but would potentially be better used by being funneled towards facilities and activity, as well as education. And we didn't, we may not have put this in our written statement, but we would support the view that was postulated by Brian from GAA there, that there should be a specific regulator for gambling to enforce this law in Northern Ireland, rather than piling more pressure on the PSNI. So, Chair, that's our statement to open with, and I'm very happy to hand back to you and see if there are any questions for Sean or for myself.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and another excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
I had to say that, Chair. You had to say that.
I had to say that. Just as you just said there, Patrick, you've just said that your paper states that you welcome the use of the levy to directly fund projects related to gambling addiction, but also then for, as you say in the very last point in your paper, extending that funding to other sports and physical activity. Have you any ideas of what that might entail, or what the levy could do? And do you think this levy then should be statutory?
I think it would be important, Chair, to make the levy statutory if at all possible. And I would point to, and maybe Sean will add a little bit to this, some of the projects that we currently carry out within our foundation, such as Stay On Side, which is a project to either keep people out of the criminal justice system, or when they're in the criminal justice system, to show them ways out of that. A gambling, sometimes it will be gambling that heads people into that direction. We have our Connect program, which brings people together from across the communities in individual locales within Northern Ireland. Particularly, we've done a lot of work in South Belfast on that one. And our ahead of the game, just to be precise, mental health program is also one where we've identified people who come in with gambling issues, and often as part of these programs, whether it be Connect, whether it be ahead of the game, or whether it be Stay On Side, it's the physical activity that really gets people excited about being part of those projects. Yes, you can give them, a branded T-shirt. You can bring them together for conversations and shared learnings. But quite often, it's the physical activity, with a football on a five-a-side pitch that starts to get people really to break down the issues that they've had. So, Chair, we would definitely recommend that if there is a levy that is able to be placed in this area, that some of it is if you like, funneled towards physical activity rather than just, if you like, classroom education.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in other members at this stage. Stephen, you have indicated.
Thank
Any
you.
other members, if you wish to indicate, if you could let me know by raising your hand. I can't see everyone on screen, but if you can raise your hand, we'll get to you. Stephen, sorry, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Patrick, for your presentation, and concur with you on the 470 million. The value of football certainly is very positive, and also I think we'll just take the opportunity to welcome your recent announcement on the ticket price review. I know we spoke to you along with a number of colleagues on that some months ago, so I think that's certainly good news. And I think just thank you for your submission here today. It's very interesting, and I suppose it does a lot of similarities to the earlier presentation with the GAA. And the ahead of the game campaign with ex-players and so on is obviously vitally important. And I think the thing about gambling, as I mentioned earlier, you probably heard it, the rise of online gambling. And you could be a player at a top club here or a grassroots youth child playing football, and you could be equally impacted by gambling. So I think it highlights the importance of it. Just in terms of the link up with NIFL, the NI Football League, obviously who administer the leagues and so on. Just would like to know a wee bit more about your engagement with them in terms of working to address gambling and so on.
Well, Stephen, thank you for that, and I will do a very brief answer, and then maybe Sean can add something to it. And particularly, thanks for the comments on the ticket price review. We, as you know, we spoke to you and other local representatives about that. We also spent a long time talking to the amalgamation of official Northern Ireland supporters clubs, and we think we're in a place now that enables us to go forward quite well. With regard to Northern Ireland Football League, they run the biggest league in Northern Ireland, or rather, to be clear, they run the most senior league in Northern Ireland. It's not the biggest league. I think the Northern Amateur Football League would be bigger than that, with 92 clubs. But we have a relationship with all of our leagues, and we encourage leagues and clubs to take up the gambling training that we're able to access through GamCare in the first place, and so we have a strong relationship with NIFL on that, but we would also have a relationship with the other leagues as well. And Sean, I don't know if there's anything you could add to that in terms of the outreach to clubs and the gambling training?
Yeah, Patrick, and good morning, everyone. I think what I would just add to that is that we also have a National Security and Integrity Officer who a core part of his role is both to provide education and ensure senior clubs and NIFL clubs are provided with education around gambling, as well as monitoring. This is one that I know Patrick mentioned in his presentation, that UEFA are very keen on ensuring that there's consistency in the approach to monitoring, education, and ensuring that there are no irregular gambling patterns, etc., that happen right across their member nations. So the National Security and Integrity Officer works very closely with NIFL on that. In addition to that, what I would say is NIFL have had and continue to have a partnership with Sporting Chance. And that charity, what that does is it allows academy players in NIFL academies education, senior player, also education and workshops with the senior players, and a counselling and referral service linked to any gambling or addiction problems. So we work closely with NIFL in summary, and we continue to ensure that we keep up to date with other programmes across Europe and ensure that Northern Ireland receives its fair share of support that is required in that.
Okay, thanks, folks. Thank you. Thanks, Guy.
Paul Free?
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. A question I have on the cheating aspect. Now, they're substituting the very small paragraph in the 85 order to this more thorough and complete new clause 12. But when I look down, obviously we're creating an offence, and it's much more in depth than the old cheating offence. But looking at the old schedule, 169, Article 169, on indictment, a fine or imprisonment for 2 years or both, and on summary, the statutory maximum or imprisonment for 6 months or both. So I know that, like the GA before you, welcome the new clause 12, but do you think that penalty or tariff of the offence is appropriate?
I think if I can take that one, Patrick. I'm not sure it would be for us as a football association to I suppose opine on the length of sentences or of tariffs on that offence. What I would say is, to repeat what Patrick says, we absolutely welcome that the offence is now recognised as a criminal offence, and it's one that certainly. Thankfully, not as much in Northern Ireland, but I know that in other countries throughout Europe and throughout the world, actually, it's a real challenge for the national associations and the governing bodies to ensure that that cheating and that match fixing is identified, monitored, and eradicated. So this will certainly support that. As I say, I'm not sure it would be up to the association to opine, other than to say that we do absolutely welcome the recognition as a criminal offence.
Obviously, the old paragraph in the old order 85, it's just a paragraph on cheating, and if I can recall, it's more about being the banker or facilitating. So to me that reads as if it's the bookmaker, who's organised something at a venue or outside of a venue to do with matches or a match. In this, it's much more than that. So, I suppose, whilst I not hold you to a tariff, do you think there should be varying levels of penalty from someone who runs a book to someone who and then changes the course of a match, or someone who partakes in a match and tries to influence the game in a certain way in order to win in gambling?
Well, I think it would. I mean, again, it would depend on the level of involvement of each participant, and I'm sure a judge would be much better placed to make that call than I would. But what I would say is, we do welcome, and having reviewed the legislation, we do welcome that it is much more in depth than previous legislation, and it does recognise that actually the participants in the game can change the outcome of the game, and other people can benefit. And I think, largely speaking, all those who benefit knowingly out of this, I think, should be held accountable for it, and therefore it should be eradicated right across those levels. I think, again, it would depend on, as I say, the different levels of engagement in whatever offence takes place.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Mark Durgan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the fellas for the presentation. Sorry, I was on late on the last one. I would just really follow on from a question Stephen had actually raised with your the previous delegation from the GAA, and that was in terms of the admirable step that they took in terms of moving away from sponsorship of teams, events, competitions, stadia by betting companies. Now, I appreciate by their own admission, while it's an admirable move, it might have been much easier for them than it would be for you, given the lack of prevalence of sponsorship arrangements that were in place with betting companies. Now, I'd asked you this, I think, before on a previous visit to committee. I don't know, was it you, Patrick? You were in for something else, and I'd raised this issue. How important is sponsorship revenue to your organisation and teams in it, and do you know what sort of rate of that would come from betting companies?
Well, Mark, thank you for the question, and it may well be that we had talked about this. I think I've been in front of this committee several times over the past few years, so we may well have touched upon it. But our clubs are largely small clubs. They're largely community clubs, and they raise their own funds. There are some at the top level within the Northern Ireland Football League where we are able, as an association, to support them a little bit with funding. But largely our clubs, start the year with nothing in the bank. They raise money, they spend all of that money, and they probably finish with not very much in the bank as well. So sponsorship, where normally at a local level, is very important to all of our clubs. And at this point, we don't feel that we would be right to preclude clubs, if they so wished, from having a small relationship in sponsorship terms with gambling companies. And there will be some who do. There will be many who don't. As I said in the opening, we don't have a betting partner ourselves, but we do understand that betting has been part of sport probably since sport started, and generally always will be. And I think it's much better to have a very well regulated industry than it is to try and drive betting underground and out of sight. So whereas we are not, we don't feel that we would wish to outlaw all betting sponsorships, because we don't want to close that potential opportunity for some of our clubs. It's not something that we are actively progressing as an association ourselves. And in fact, as I mentioned in the opener, we are doing a lot of education work to work with people who suffer harm from gambling, and we do invest a fair amount of our time and effort in that.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I think when I made the point previously, I was stating that I thought it would be premature to go down that prohibition route of advertising, and that, I suppose, given the precarious financial situation of so many clubs and across your organisation, that would have been exacerbated, I suppose, by the pandemic. However, the Minister has told us, and the Department are telling us, that there will be further gambling legislation coming in the next mandate, and I would be surprised if there isn't an attempt at that point, be it from the Department or private members, to include in that legislation something around the relationship between gambling companies or betting companies and sports. So it's something you might want to be preparing for. Well,
Mark, thank you for that. And as always, we take the view that it's the people like yourselves on the Hill who generally make legislation, and it's our job to comply with it as and when it comes out. So yes, we would prepare, and we would we would manage our way through that as and when.
Well, it's people like you that help us make good legislation. I think it's worth stating that we aren't. We're on the Hill, but we're not in any sort of tower. But thank you.
Thank you so much. As no one else has indicated, thank you again, Patrick and Sean, for your written presentation, for what you've updated us with today. For now, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's been a pleasure to speak to the committee.
Thank you. Members, we're moving on to agenda item 6, which is Northern Ireland Sports Forum briefing on the bill again. And your briefing is at page 59 in your pack, and I'll welcome Kearney. There he is. There's the gentleman who will be leaving the sports forum soon. So, Kieran, I'm wishing you well for your exit and wishing you well for your entrance in another sporting capacity. Kieran, I'll turn over to yourself. We're a bit tight for time because we're due to have the Minister speaking at 10:30. So if I can give you 5-10 minutes and then we'll get into questions. Kieran, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair and Vice Chair and everybody, and thank you, Kelly, again for your best wishes. I will go through it as quick as I can. I think a lot of the points that possibly will be made are questions that we would be support the position of the IFA and Ulster GA that you've heard from this morning. So I'd like to just from the outset just thank all the members for providing the Northern Ireland Sports Forum with the opportunity to present this morning in relation to this bill. As said, my name is Kearney, Executive Manager of the Northern Ireland Sports Forum. which is a voluntary association. We have 100 member organisations from national governing bodies of sport, sport for development organisations, charities, other umbrella bodies, and some council bodies. Our membership encompasses major spectator sports such as Ulster Rugby, GA, IFA, to indoor sports, basketball, netball, and outdoor sports, obviously, such as RYA, sailing, canoeing, and other umbrella organisations or sports for development organisations. Examples of Disability Sport NI, Special Olympics Ulster, the Mary Peters Trust, Belfast City Marathon, and we are secretariat as well to the all-party group on sport at the Assembly. Our response is based on the role as a representative body for the sport and recreation sector. We're providing comments, as others earlier, in policy areas which affect fundraising in the sports sector, namely societies, lotteries. And we acknowledge that other charities and bodies that have more experience in the fallout from problem gambling may be best placed to comment on policies issues such as gambling machines, open hours of bookmakers, etc. But I do would support comments and the Northern Ireland Sportsman would indicate about comments that the IFA have made about a levy and potential use for grassroots development of sport and physical activity. I think we all can recognise that sport has a strong track record of community-based fundraising activities and trying to be innovative in their approach to fundraising activities. Unfortunately, it's recognised that the legislation surrounding fundraising is outdated and restrictive for sports organisations, and the Sports Forum and our members, and obviously two of you heard from this morning, welcome this review. In respect of the amendment to societies lotteries, we do not hope or envisage any objection to the reforming societies lotteries, as this quite often is seen as fundraising as opposed to gambling. Those supporting their local clubs and sports organisations do not associate potentially buying a raffle ticket with gambling, but seeing it as supporting a good cause. Many sports clubs run a weekly £1 lottery at £1 a ticket, and it is vital income for these clubs. The ability to sell these tickets online from September was well overdue, but welcomed at the same time, and we thank the Minister for that. For fundraising raffles, the £1 limit on ticket price is restrictive and cumbersome. The cost of maintaining and developing capital facilities or sports programmes can range from small amounts to hundreds of thousands of pounds. Fundraising at this level can be very difficult. However, sports enthusiasts see supporting their local clubs through purchasing tickets as supporting fundraising rather than a gambling opportunity. Sports clubs, we believe, are well placed within their communities to cap the price of raffle tickets based on the particular needs of that club at that time and also on the total value of ticket sales. I think suggestions you have heard maybe this morning from Brian and Ulster GA would be quite reasonable. Sports clubs in Northern Ireland are at a disadvantage in comparison to their counterparts in GB in terms of restrictions that are placed on them with regards to the caps and the price tickets, income and prices. Many organisations here are governed on an all-Ireland basis with greater flexibility for fundraising opportunities in the south, such as purchase of tickets, and a significantly higher level of capital funding for sports clubs development, which again places our clubs at a disadvantage. We welcome the steps taken by the Minister to date, however, would urge further support and supporting the voluntary and community sector as well to be implemented as soon as possible. In terms of need for other lotteries not included in the bill, there are no provisions in the bill to update the rules for other types of lotteries, namely private lotteries and small lotteries at exempt entertainments. It would be a missed opportunity not to update the rules either by secondary legislation or within this bill. The rules in private lotteries do not permit ticket sales of more than £1,000 and tickets must be sold on the premises. The ticket cap of £1,000 could be increased to a level of around £10,000, and this could be a useful form of fundraising by sports organisations of their own premises. An example of this would be a half-time draw at a sports event. As a consequence of the COVID pandemic, where attendances may be reduced and the requirement that private lottery ticket sales must be made on the premises, we believe it is difficult at times to run a private lottery with the sole requirement that tickets sold on the premises. We believe private lotteries should be permitted to sell their tickets by electronic means to those who normally frequent an event or game but may not be able to. The rules for small lotteries at exempt entertainments are only permitted again to sold on the premises. The entertainment takes place and during the progress of the entertainment. We recommend that the words "on the premises" is removed from section 1332B of the 1985 order to allow exempt entertainments to happen online. We would also question why raffle tickets are not permitted to be sold prior to the event, and ask that the prohibition we removed, as in practice many organisations do sell raffle tickets or any type of tickets prior to the event, or for prices potentially over £1 without knowing that they shouldn't. Prize competitions, in terms of not requiring persons to pay to participate, is also an area in clause 11 which we would like to make comment on. While free prize draws may be something that are intended to be used by commercial organisations, they are also the interest to some sports organisations. The Northern Ireland Sports Forum is unsure, however, if section 168 of the 1985 order also applies to sports, charities and fundraising appeals, as 168.1 refers to conducting prize competitions through any newspaper or connection with any trade or business. A recent trend in local fundraising is through the crowdfunder concept. This is currently being used by Sport NI in the Build Back Better Project Reboot programme. Crowdfunding is an online vehicle where people donate towards a good cause within their local community, such as fundraising development, coaching programmes and wellbeing initiatives, with a fund being matched at 50% currently by Sport NI. A club may want to reward any donors who have entered into it with a free prize draw as a thanks for making a donation to the crowdfunder campaign. Providing an opportunity to reward donors may be entered into a raffle for a club polo shirt, a ticket for a game, and a thanks for supporting a fundraising activity, rather than a gambling exercise due to the small tokenistic potential nature of the prizes offered by somebody within crowdfunding, again as an example. Finally, we believe the role of a regulatory body, which has been suggested, should be considered and introduced, and we would also support comments from others that the need for the review to be for legislation to be reviewed on an ongoing basis to ensure it remains fit for purpose, and the role for, as I say, regulatory bodies. I thank the committee again for this opportunity and happy to take any questions in relation to this.
Thank you very much, Kieran, and another very good presentation that gives us more questions, which I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, Kieran, but the £1 has me a bit concerned. I'll just say that just as an individual member of this committee, because this legislation will last as it has done. You know, the legislation runs on for a long time, and £1 today is very different from what £1 was 10 years ago, and £1 will be in 10 years' time. So my concern would be about that £1. But if we're to protect people from gambling, have you any thoughts on, is it just remove a cap on that, or to place a higher cap on it?
I think place a higher cap. I say most of the activities would be in the area of £1, £5, £10 or £20 draws. There may be an opportunity, obviously, to do things such as Brian indicated earlier, £10 draws on a monthly basis, so £120 on a cap. But a lot of those fundraising activities are kind of almost one in a generation type of a fundraiser for a very large capital project that may cost hundreds of thousands or potentially even more. Those are not their everyday activities, and not every sports club or organisation has the capacity to go and sell tickets to that level or to engage with their community. I'm aware that the engagement and the interest of sport within the committee and the members that are either in the room or joining us online, they also are very aware of the type of grassroots clubs and organisations that are involved in, and the size and scale of those may differ. What may suit a taekwondo or a judo club will be very, very different to what suits a GA, or football or rugby or hockey or a golf club. So sport is obviously not a one size fits all, but I think the parameters of an upper limit on ticket price, say, is £120 or £150. I think that would be reasonable, and again, the prize fund limits of that 400,000, or again, as an example of what was mentioned earlier, would be reasonable.
Yeah, thank you. I know that in the past I've bought a brick to help to develop, a local GAA club, and in purchasing that brick, put my dad's name up on a wall, which he was delighted with. But as you say, it was a once in a lifetime. You know, it was an investment for something that's very good within the community. But Mark, I'll bring you in now.
Sorry, I hadn't done
Oh, sorry, I thought you were waving at me. I just ask you then. So that was about the pound. The regulatory body you're happy enough with, but how do you feel about the lottery being reported, for instance, to the police, the 7 days in advance of a lottery? How do you feel about that?
Listen, I can sit here and say that is what happens all the time, and I think we would all be quite aware that sports organisations wouldn't be aware of that nature and need, and if every sports organisation and club a grassroots activity was to follow that regulation, the police would have very little time in their hands to do other things. But I think the introduction of a regulatory body to help and support that and to communicate what should be done, and whether it be through the code of practice, which organisations such as obviously the Sports Forum, governing bodies of sport and other organisations can promote and engage with sports to establish the practice as needs. But I would be, as somebody who's sent as a representative body, sports organisations are well regulated in terms of from their governing bodies, from grassroots to national level, are used to meeting certain standards and engaging and working with various standards, whether it be in terms of safeguarding or integrity, gambling, anti-doping, etc. So I think if it provided more confidence to their stakeholders, members or whatever, I think sports clubs would understand that. But I suppose it's a case of the nature of how often that you need to communicate with the police or you know, on every, as Brian mentioned earlier, Christmas bazaar. I think that's a bit cumbersome to that level.
Do you think then a regulatory body could provide advice for different sporting organisations to ensure that they're able to uphold and abide by the rules?
I think so, and we engage very heavily with the Northern Ireland Sports Forum with NICFA, and I've spoken to NICFA for a number of years on these issues, and NICFA and other community and voluntary sectors organisations as well are able to provide advice, guidance and support, and I suppose promote any kind of codes of practice or information that is required from any regulatory body.
Members, I'm just looking to see if there's anybody else indicating. I don't see anyone online, but if there is anyone, if you want to call out or let me know. No one else around the room. Kieran, do you know what? I think you've helped us quite a bit. Just one last question, actually, from me. Are there any sporting bodies that are involved with the Northern Ireland Sports Forum that would have difficulties if advertising is, you know, advertising removal, revenue from advertising for gambling?
I suppose it wouldn't be. It's one of those things that wouldn't be. It's hard to have an absolute agreed approach on. Obviously, we've heard from two bodies this morning. There is a level of advertising within football. I note. Kelly, if you recall, I'm sure you were probably at the all-party group where we had a discussion about this, and even with the MLAs in the room, there was we couldn't get an agreed approach. But probably gambling sponsorship would only potentially be in relation to a minority of our members. We have 75 governing bodies of sport. The vast majority of those the areas of gambling doesn't come into their way of thinking whatsoever. So I think in terms of a unified approach, it's very difficult on that. But for some bodies, as I think Patrick and Sean outlined kind of their own approach earlier, and we have other bodies would be from that same line of thinking, but some may be exactly the same approach as the Ulster GA. So I suppose you appreciate the difficulty to get a uniformed approach on that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Kieran. And as I said before, thank you very much for your presentation today. It has certainly helped us and helped the committee to think more about the content of this bill as it moves forward. So thank you very much. Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you, Chair.
Good luck on your new job.
Thank you. See you all.
See you
Bye.
soon. Members, we're moving on now to agenda item 7, which is date, time and location of the next meeting. Members, our next meeting is on Thursday the 9th of December at 9 a.m. in room 29. It's getting close to the end of these 9 a.m. meetings, but I don't think so. Probably in January we'll be back to them again. But for now, that's us and it's the end of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is